Seth, I assume, do you want to be on the email chain?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Give me one more
Oh,
second.
I almost totally got it. that'd be a bad start to the debate. Yeah. Planless. Exactly.
Give me a drink, Bob.
Hot or cold?
Cold.
Okay.
Red Bull or water? Water's fine. Thanks.
Seth, I have paper if you're looking for it.
Thank you.
Okay, I just sent one AC. Yeah. Can you take care of that? Go Bucks. Hey, we got our 12-13 wins so far. We're killing it. Rigging for Wiggins. Anyone not good? Anyone not good? Contention 1 is terrorism, nuclear terror, threat high, nothing checks, bottom 13, Harvard. Right, first assessment concluded the threat of nuclear terror is urgent, real, the scale. Some business demonstrate consistency, risk by terrorist damage, of the women, no technology, grease, available weapons usable, material globalization makes easier to move, materials making a crude bomb would be, capable of numerous sizes to confirm the terrorists could, open a assault weapon and make useful material difficult to attack. Al-Qaeda has assault weapons for 2 decades, the group has banned its own nuclear ambitions, and it's feasible. It'll escalate to war kit in 12. The 100 reports have been published, nuclear terror is possible to bounce accessible. The problems have been solved, terrorists have built simple, device information available weapons, radio and pre-brought as well as possible research fuels that expand mass radiation severe. Sanctions will follow nuclear terror secretly to transformation to the global order, and that causes extinction. Even without retaliation, 2 and 7 exposed small size would produce the casualties of 1 million one single explosion. Would be like a cost payment that has been predicted to localization catastrophe would have very national consequences. Terrorists would strike there and second generate casualty about to full scale nuclear chain super conflict expulsion rate leads to significant global contributions. And nuclear terrorism causes accidental U.S. Russian war extinction. Barrett in 13 war in all U.S. Russian catastrophe consequences lead to extinction of humanity. Invert nuclear war continue to present a substantial risk terrorist group. They cause attacks in the U.S. Russians up on attacks by a variety of serious possible Al-Qaeda sought the nuclear weapon or other massive without election control limitations will deteriorate, increasing nuclear tension. There are with third parties raise tension in both nations and misinterpretation to the possibility of attacks. And advanced bioterrorism is also likely to cause extinction. No defense. Myvarov in 13th method weaponized defense advancement of the 40% of die in the future. The anti-disadvantages into by accident produced the numerous agents are highly lethal, making it with the entire human race proximity is to work into global pandemic epidemic spread almost without checking accident would be insufficient medical biology of enormous advantage on utterly transform the field of terrorists without vastly more doubt. Bugs to choose from biotechnology driven to rapidly invention to lethality and drug resistant powers can be played with a virus and engineer could drive the human race to extinction, and terrorists will target the grid. No defense. IBD in 14. Grid is vulnerable. Terrorists attacking the Africa could have addressed for wise disruption. Very few experts will rudimentary could take down the grid in the first place as well. And Al-Qaeda can smuggle in terrorists, and extinction collapses agriculture. Hacked in 11. Like just reduce the population. Dark age condition influenced by would break down food chain with collapsing. Medical supplies would be lost. Communication being crippled. Modern life comes to an end. The infrastructure will descend into chaos and extinction. Luger in 4. Alex Sagas. Starvation, environment, world peace, and famine. Breaking down terrorism. World feed the world. Minimize the global insulin proliferation. WOD demands for the increased U.S. growing to more U.S. taking position more activity reduction to successfully decisive role in the survival of billions of the 12 of our planet. The plan is critical to allied cooperation over terror. Atwood 9. The democratically effective in many areas suffer greatly from the perception United States at the end of the world. The less possible bearing the against authority to residence on how miraculous and present without its borders. The upholding a rapid executive ill serve our international relationship cooperation rally quelling terrorism allies. Everyone independent wealthy prison technique Guantanamo British attendance amplify this proof of this because of the position related to the fiction that conduct to be justified between the tensions. We're not within the United States person affected heavily by the arrest within the guard and support of our allies have been more critical by the international goodwill quickly disbanded the instead the rights to the in-person without insured people within our own borders. The least allies already refusing to accept and detainees. Our goals to extend the double is hampered by the detention in the first step of remaining our relationship with restoring the diplomatic credibility new to the commitment to due process and its unique conflict blocks allied cooperation. Now domestic captures key Chesney and 13 military detention when captured within the United States is going to have consequences for business between citizens and alarming to our allies. I'm talking about security officials as well elsewhere have become greatly more difficulty more and more for make sure the conspiracy of become authorities dimensional as a security implication in the world. And allied cooperation solves all interlinks to global terrorism. Turbulent for cred has never been lower. The war stepping with the United States and international cooperation fight against the effective heroes by securing world ports. CSI needs to expand the program's regional vulnerability administration and must also work having to distribute financially small amounts of fund devastating tax fuel. Most initiative in need of breaking up the communication. The U.S. needs intelligence other nations share the burden. The let's the U.S. State has a more national community to work on this cooperation matters and restricting domestic captures key to local support. That's key. Nachman in that sacrificial law alienates domestic communities and allies who help us in detention. Undermines relationship with key communities vital to the safeguard trust and confidence is important. Otherwise, we cut off our homeland detentions and domestic law enforcement has targeted the whole community. The allied cooperation is cooperative by enterprise level serious consequences be serious over detention and receive amendment rule of laws aid and exchange by facilitating recruitment detention. Threats U.S. standing to drive the political cooperation with the country legitimacy essential. U.S. needs to cooperate to fight terrorism effectively. Now, contention 2 is the PCA Authority for Domestic Detention repeals Posse Comitatus Act. Wolverton in 1380 protocol which authorized president to military to detain the status place of the military is both the present tension inside out the borders of the U.S. Endowment is empowered by the president Congress. Less de facto legislative repeal of the Posse Comitatus forbidding the use of military and domestic law enforcement key component mandates granted immense power to the executive branch. And even if it's not used, legal uncertainty forces the military to train for domestic captures that lead role snowballs into broader law enforcement power. Chesney 13 the why we resist the military detention for domestic captures the tradition not having military be lead when it comes to domestic security lead role detention within the U.S. have cuts with everything military maybe in proximity to the executive role that position incentivized to take the other as long as they are going to take some legal certainty applicable to citizen capture front. These of course are very torn up and it's escalating now because domestic capture Heaton 13 the will take on to have an El Mario legal residence centralizing the way for increasing aggressive assertion to the executive party's military against civilian presidential department broad-based mobilization military force wide since addressed wider interception of the PCA except has been able to swallow the rule and PCA ruins military transformation that causes global conflict from multiple transnational threats. Owens 3 law service has been capable of advancing interest against the threats. The cautionary spectrum of healthy CMR makes it's been possible increase in the military role in domestic affairs since the impact of the healthy CMR involved in the military domestic will undermine the warfare capabilities cause the fighting spirits decline taking massive terror new national nations had the diverted focus and research away from the central mission combat training and warfighting. The result is the military able to defeat an enemy. The military get politicized to a dangerous extent. It's possible that the military failed to defeat insurgency to express civil war. See trust with the lack of decline potential competence connecting to war policy as waning. This manifestation of failure to changing difference global stability, economic instability, failed states, resource scarcity, pandemic, disease, climate change, piracy, smuggling, trafficking, the use exercise enormous influence in foreign affairs policies. The CMR will be best into the military can't succeed. That causes global nuclear war. Let's the global insecurity, environmental features, accelerating change, globalization, technology, innovation regime, confidence and scarcity. The U.S. will be remain pyramid quality of the leadership of the ability to adapt to the events, organized crime, beliefs, desperate regional tensions. Africa, Middle East, South Asia are all burdened with civil conflict. The U.S. will dominate foreseeable futures action leading to the influence that the hope and rising instability that intercurrents the world. The regional crisis, attention, miscalculations, escalation makes our conflict between several major parts of the U.S. into war. The country between China, Taiwan, Indo-Pac, and Korea will continue to serious escalation become possibility. Destabilized by Iran, North Korea, Syria will result in escalation. Use of WMDs and detention training forces trade-offs that wreck military readiness. Wilmer 9. The military not organized for domestic police work for the fighting winning wars except that the theories are diverted by the try-case specify the dishonor retention of the rest. It's not anticipated train different skill sets whenever the military role national defense seconds with detained residents even under my face and liability detention of the U.S. face versus the conflict. And that goes nuclear talent. 7 international order depends on the American power order depends all the military know about capable defending threats effectively. The danger of world military seconds greater than Syria, China, emerging Russia's experiments failed in the operating tables. Increased readiness levels drops America's power is an important subject factor to risk to China. Even Taiwan him use nuclear based danger may not the percent of American power can deter them from breaking out in PCA violations. Snowball Cancero in 3 the P federal government's waging intervention. The will for tremendous support for the public to continue the notification will lead to the PCA will exception swallow the rule. The nation begins to the slippery slope of domestic military intervention that wrecks naval power. Cunningham in 3 the law enforcement mission are degraded or making the operation temperature difficult maintaining additional the retention problems on mission instruction naval lessons not engaged in training needed for the combat trades hard rating supposed to protect the PCA will provide PC military enforcement friends ability to practice effective law enforcement detection will drag redundancy shortage of the equipment cutters are cutting close to the port security that causes nuclear war. Eagle and 11 the under the reduced naval power USC to alliances lack incredible capabilities will workforce established bases will run the irrelevant army and air force house training Chinese like Japan is going to create nuclear weapons piracy increase the Arctic Russia surge dominance level humanity cholera malaria epidemic Iran dominates the has nuclear power Egypt Syria Jordan and the Iraqi Texas Israel NATO shutter the trade decrease blocks would develop the next increase hazard to shut down we can cover this as a highly importance of lost predominant sea power. Contention 3 is solvency. First, statutory prohibition of domestic detention solves legal controversy. Executive has already ruled out, but codification is essential to solidify policy. Chesney 13 the benefit scheme option table is slim because executive sole interest little appetite to certainty is written persistence for any administration, whatever restrict to attempts to detention with effective policy developed in favor of the criminal justice turned out to be always detention potentially available to theoretical matters, not only functional available. Executive lawyers are not confident this or affirmatively legal, and they have reliable alternatives. Obama made their policy efficient not to it. CJ is the domestic capture position of Obama detention. Was been a year since it was appetite the either party trying to guess it has. Data policy executive branch would not attend the administration to break the consensus litigation so the issue rate the CJ. Everyone's too strong. The effect of the normal sovereign law has with the prescription. There's a greater latitude function exists every time a specific taken custody. The country explodes into device ability to make there a big gulf between the real and the test plan. The perception that the detention means in order for domestic capture the real cost as it generates political friction, centralized polarization, and the perception that the detention means viable option easily eliminate those who fear the result of confusion, fuel sharp debate, and domestic detention will never be used. Plan codifies the status quo. Chesney 13. Against which the Supreme Court not approve the possible detention of the use of the rest within the U.S. The criminal justice laws value for the arrestation, detention, the carries significant litigation was pushed by the different justice of Obama. Of course, the administration of the party would use these authors because option to different because other surgeons of insurance we recommend that the codified section of practical status quo. The Congress the detention authority EU method and NDA United States push detention in the United States. Now the plan, the United States federal government should substantially prohibit the authority of the president under the authorization for use of military force in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 to incarcerate persons captured in the United States without the trial. Now don't judge this debate just because it's a new affirmative flexibility, including the ability to choose and move within the topic, is a reciprocal response to the negatives already present ability to select arguments to respond to and focus the debate. Now this isn't even new. They read it against us, so they're obviously aware and should be prepared. Domestic tension is the heart of the topic. It's been read by Wayne, Kansas, now MSU. It's a relevant contemporary issue that shouldn't be excluded by topicality. Also plans a substantial restriction of authority. Nigger restriction 11 NDA expense government authority and by Obama executive authority to authorize the detention status the law will become basis for aggressive intervention, giving a more broader position in the first place. Also legislative is key. Vatican 11 1022 establishes president in favor of detention. Fortunately, amendment will ensure that detention is horatory and practice the president here to command suspected terrorist state of the U.S. to pass it through the courts. The action of the prosecution shows knowledge of us to view the detention as a preferred option in the important message president and endeavoring country through practice. Mark after through practice.
You said you wanted an electronic copy of the plan,
Yes,
right?
please.
Okay. Do you want that before cross-ex?
Yeah, that'd be great.
What are we clarifying? So the common policy advantage is
Bad, actually.
based off of U.S. military deployments against civilians in the U.S.
In the training that would be required, even if the military doesn't have to detain citizens, the perception of learning all the issues related to habeas rights would mess up transitions to deal with globalization's threats. I'm going to sit down, but if you all have questions, feel free to ask.
Yeah.
You guys President endeavoring to the country. Yep. The top one. Just collapse to that header one. There's a couple plans. This is just the first one. Yep.
I just emailed you about the plan.
So you email with them?
Yeah, I did.
Alright, I'll start crossing after that.
Oh, you still prep better cross
No,
eyes?
I'm just waiting
Okay.
for the, you go through?
No, I
Give me a sec. I'm catching up here. Okay, what's up?
So prep's done. How much time do you have?
8:26 was left.
Alright, so the plan says the United States federal government should reduce the authority. Is it a statutory or judicial restriction?
It says the United States federal
I
government.
get that, but the topic says and or. Do you really want
It
me
would
to
most
go
likely
through
be a
this
statutory restriction.
Is it most likely?
Most likely.
What do you mean by most likely?
It would most likely.
So if
So
we
there's
read
a
a
court
dissent
counterclaim
to,
compete.
if we read a dissent to Congress, we need to federal links.
Dissides would make sense because it would most likely be a statutory restriction, but counterclaims that sub-specify beyond the US FD would not be effective.
Alright, cool. So the plan removes the authorization for persons incarcerated or captured in the United States without trial. What is the United States?
Well, do you mean like what geographically is the United States? Well, the 50 states
So 50
just the
continental
and
states?
territories? I don't really know.
Okay, cool.
It's like
Let's
the
talk about
states.
the EU intel gathering advantage. Both of those things have been on the books since 2000 or 2001. I guess.
Which
The
things have been on the-
NDA authority. It's been
Okay.
over a decade since then. We're still having high levels of intel cooperation. What possibly could they bring be?
Well, our evidence indicates that because there's never been an actual capture, it's never been fully pushed, right? So the closest it came, I don't think you understand. The closest we came was Almari, who was never indefinitely detained, right? So it never caused the public controversy and outcry that would have collapsed Allied support and or domestic support.
The reason why we never detain anybody is because congressional backlash, which means Obama.
I disagree. I think it also says that there's Obama does not want to detain people. You actually have the opposite way, right? Congress. Hold on, I want to explain this because this is really important for all dissents. This is like really.
For the terrorist advantage, do you have to win that we eventually will actually detain somebody for intel gathering to collapse?
I don't think so. I think
Alright,
that's
if
the
is
strongest
not true,
internal
if we
link.
did not actually have to detain anybody, why has the authority being on the books for the last decade not triggered the impact of terrorism?
Well, for one, we've become much less or much more susceptible. We've had much less Allied cooperation. Our Chesney evidence indicates that there are current frictions that are threatening to collapse.
Right, so the
programs.
Chesney evidence also isolates things like a spying.
Where do you think it says that? What line do you think says
Well,
this?
you know, because you copy and pasted our card from R1AC and you forgot the bottom card.
Well, then it should be really easy to find the line in the card. But
Right.
where do you think it says spying?
Well, the article does.
Which
If you, like,
Chesney
read the
article?
Maybe you would possibly know that.
Which
Alright,
Chesney
cool.
article?
We
Let's
did,
go to the second
second,
advantage.
but
It's just it's a little throwback. It's all good.
The second advantage is this military deployment. I the internal link is A, focusing on training exercise of the military causes the impact, and B, if we were to actively deploy military forces for security purposes in the United States, that triggers the impact.
There's some more internal links. One is a
Right,
question of
internal links?
CMR. That's sort of the first internal link, that if the military is used to domestically detain individuals,
Right,
undercuts
so do you have
civilian.
to win that we actually definitely detain somebody for the
No.
government?
Well,
Right,
probably
that's
for the
a good
CMR
question.
one,
Why
but we
the
have
last
other
10 years not
internal links.
busted?
Hold on, back it up. Probably for the CMR one, we have to win that they detain someone, but we also have a general spillover claim for both the naval scenario and for the global transformation one, that the mere threat of it blurs it, swallows up training resources, and then messes with the LUD's impact.
Okay.
Yo. And another minute 25 or 35 minutes.
43.
6:43.
Okay, I sent it out. It'll be 7 off at Vantage 1 Advantage shift.
Seven, advantage one, advantage two.
Yeah.
Got it, one sec.
prohibition, the absolute condition, sheet around, 12 ordinary different definitions, restrictions, not including reporting, monitoring, supervising, black law, defines restriction, limitation, imposed, prohibited from action, negative, limits absolute prohibition, every single condition or regulation, acts as a functional, restriction on self-access, war powers, authority, exposes topic next up, interpretation, aspects, restrict entire topic list area, in the area means all the activities in United States, 13 activities in the area means all the activities in the area violation, they only restrict in the United States, negative limits, any other interpretation allows every single type of restriction to be applied to every single country or geographic area in the world, creates hundreds of small and unpredictable affirmative next up, Ukraine, descent, Romans, resolve, deterring Russian aggression, now share, maker, 26 Russian invasion of Ukraine, their demand of the focus on using terms of Russian proportion short all they so all shift American attention representing war shift Russians and Russians actions and electoral results has become this one engages speaking out. I don't think I've seen the president or personally engaged in any foreign policy crisis. The plans, restrictions, tank perception of resolve. Congress and Obama must present a united front to deter Russian impeachers. 319 is local block message. I'm sorry to stop carbon over. Responsible all these democrats need to work together. My parties are punished. Russian Highland U.S. resolve every few days to make their speech now. There's the White House workers all in agreement that the U.S. must defend obligations of the UN Charter. Washington should focus on how to resolve the crisis rather than policies blasting the U.S. needs to credibility of the light having no policies question the country's credibility by political base. Take less once crisis has been dissolved. Russian aggression across the Baltic states and those nuclear comments 329E. Great communication or computing this develop stand up new and both computing grab off the way to take the conquer nuclear war response would always supposed to be immediate threat of escalation next off cannibal attacks. The President of the United States should submit for compulsory jurisdiction to the International Court of Justice, the authorities to incarcerate persons captured within the United States. The President should ask that case take. Yeah, you should rewrite the counter context. Yeah, sorry. I'm going to read the cards before we do the text again later. Solve the ICJ will rule against harmful use of force, ruling against the U.S. moves credibility. Murphy A. The court is comfortable in extended review of the illegality of U.S. force by the U.S. But the court sees no difficulty in investigation. Judicial review of the court is ready to expand the court's relations from having started the U.S. and the court to give here the relative and the developing world of the detention. Reflect the use of states with whom the U.S. have just reached the court. Turn back from Anglo-American thinking, the subjecting use of force to ICJ reinvigorates the credibility of the institutions. All goals to Bodie Meyer, Meyer. 3. Refusal to accept the compulsory jurisdiction of the ICJ. Activity refusal of the U.S. to protect all actions, special submission to the ICJ. Result of the court. Resumes the court relations to prosecution the action of the president lords the U.S. discusses our culture strong court to dispense with indispensable element of international legal order. There's a commission on the effectiveness of the UN endorsed compulsory jurisdiction to recommend the U.S. raise up the compulsory jurisdiction for the court stronger institution of international justice make the U.S. a safer place that solves global warming stress. The court of the climate change from court to seven general principle that my obligation to the court steps to make that would be right to be regarded as subordinate court could possibly infuse the name of negotiation over the most strategic regime corporate management to encourage participation by the rather average of the court to establish standards and the GG missions of the court most capable of service stewardship of the court in long term basis on conflict to offer opportunity for the court to expand its role causes extinction for degrees careers of long leader list of scenarios options if we are structured the one push temperature on the court by the intersection projection show in direct he waves on magnitude duration causing that the court fighters harvest while they badly exceeded our capacity to support agrees with the depleted 150% and city notion levels on their levels of the least stable rights significantly except for water seriously after in the ability of South Asian support agrees becomes to the by research and against ground reduction there is those are the applications for possible there's a chance of civilization breaking down tires self-reinforcing the doctors to make climate change stop goal in irreversible next on capital attacks the United States federal judiciary should prohibit the authority of the president under the authorization for the use of military force and National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 to incarcerate persons captured in the United States without trial versus its first C the unsolved these 13 the executive act national security laws have changed significantly due court decision that national security act have one wide ripple effect because the executive has executive trying to restore national security as told by the observer maximum significant effect on the executive decision making regarding starting details as the challenging executive petitions marked petitions next off interpretation the output specified the plan is statutory restriction judicial restriction or both of the plan text statutory requires congressional legislation blacks law no the statutory restriction laws or controls that are placed on activities by legislation judicial requires the Supreme Court but Hosky 13 the Supreme Court is the eventual federal courts have no role in or pass the Constitution states the Supreme Court's jurisdiction to extend to all cases which means this jurisdiction covers every cause vote negative ground anything else makes the definitional because the 2AC is no link out of any desert or capital by specifying that they are the other restriction reading links to both the 1EC the 1EC use time because it doesn't follow such strategy because two actors require different DA in capital strategies education minor legal distinctions or key attention to details necessary in the context of legal debates and NATS and lawyers are detailed or attention to detail was it was. Important careful analysis was important. And legal arguments, characterized by precision, legal rules, principles such as consistently make fine distinctions used. One word over the may drastically change the legal between the important facts, legal conclusions can depend on how words define the important distinctions related to relevant semantics is keys. The only stable negative ground critical word reroute preparation. Next up, capital text. The United States Congress should ban the deployment of the U.S. Military for security war purposes inside the United States or against U.S. citizens. The United States Congress should ban training exercise or the United States within the United States. Sorry, I need that's in the capital text. It solves the second advantage. The net benefit is that it's now. Sorry, go back to ICJ. Counterplan. Text the President of the United States should submit for compulsory jurisdiction to the International Court of Justice. The President's authority under the authorization for the use of military force in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 to incarcerate persons captured in the United States without trial. The President should ask that the case take priority now. The terrorism advantage, no risk of nuclear terrorism, no motivation, technical hurdles, and disclosed loose nuke material. KEC 325 all countries never shown significant interest in nuclear or whatever. Except for how kind of having for the 9/11 double searches certainly last time you referring cheaper, less fiction, investigated taxes, and build even 16 civil taxes on people that don't have to work more difficult tasks than nuclear terrorism. There's no chance that all kind of maintain the enrichment or processing facility on detective wider scale for some material things. Makes the next year number of conditions such as the PTSI procuring the materials will be far more difficult today. No motivation for terror. Clark A1 may suffer from too much material, biological weapons exceedingly difficult will not operate U.S. has not developed vaccines or go to the most known conventional pathogen bioterrorism, bioterrorism may be a non-starter, no impact to the grid, loss, leader, 12 massive countrywide power terrorism, which is like the United States energy experts, say the U.S. electricity system is segmented into 3 parts, which say that we're different now, just one system returning like on another, making like us in the country extremely likely the U.S. always have power, and result the U.S. has had power filters in 2000, and response to the investigation of the blackout to Congress passing the law establishing the NERC to enforce reliability standards for local electricity generation. U.S. EU cooperation is high, driven by other factors in the planet Arctic. 9/4 revelation of Al-Qaeda cells in Europe to get new momentum to EU initiatives and U.S. makes law enforcement and the U.S. top priority cooperation has led to news activities in relations to context and increase substantially number of new agreements. Treaties including information sharing agreements, new treaties, and extradition, mutual legal assistance. U.S. EU cooperation is resilient. Arctic 9/4 U.S. EU cooperation against terrorism leads to despite frictions for all 2 years, the partnership is responsible for the U.S. and EU agencies adopted a new declaration on counterterrorism aimed at deepening the already close counterterrorism relationship. You got advantage to stuff? Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. I'll just read my other cards on this, but you should pull a couple of defense cards. That's what we said. No risk of nuclear terrorism, too many obstacles near summer. 14 the U.S. terrorism problem is minor threat, another attack is highly unlikely that there has not been a single instance over the past 12 years. The possibility that a terrorist might obtain a nuclear weapon or no station going to supply because it would have control tomorrow. Could allow terrorists to lose weapon of the U.S. But if these soldiers plans to deal with that terrorists might try to pressure fire terrorists to hold their onboard to bomb there are significant obstacles needed material needed to be delivering nuclear terrorism is not a serious threat. No ag impacts CNN. Not everyone is convinced to the risk squeeze. Food science says agriculture targets like the deadly pill. You can contaminate all this finish. Only one or two people die. Really would result in results of the terrorist dawn, which is killing a lot of people. Foundation of U.S. credibility. Oh, sorry. Go to the second advantage. Foundation of U.S. credibility is resilient. Chapman 9. Where the U.S. most powerful military, 1.4 million personnel, 1,000. Takes ships on 5,000 warheads, which has been more than the next 13 countries. U.S. been over 2 every 3 years. We haven't secure reputation right now. Good imagine we ever good American credibility or civils. Mammoth fortress and represent anything that we would call never in 12 countries that are not detected. We don't buy wars from the sense we buy wars from source.
Okay, I don't mean to psychoanalyze. I'm sensing a little bit of partner problems. What do you think is the net benefit to courts? You didn't read a politics dissent.
Yeah, so the Ukraine did.
The Ukraine is a net benefit to the courts?
Yeah, so the link to Ukraine is all about Congress and Obama presenting a united threat.
Where do you think your evidence makes that delineation? It seems to be generally about resolve and perception.
I actually think our evidence is quite good on this question. After a few days of rancorous bickering, now appears that the White House and Congress are all in agreement that the U.S. must defend the obligations of the UN Charter.
Yeah, the last thing. No, hold on. The line says the last thing the U.S. needs when its credibility is on the line is to have politicians question the country's credibility. That
Yeah,
seems to be
the whole
counterplan,
article-
right? Because it's
the whole article-
courts
well,
questioning the credibility
yeah,
of
answer your
detention.
question. The whole article is in the context of bickering between the president and Congress. Other countries perceive
that's
that
fine.
our legislative
Both-
body is against.
I want to move on. All three counterplans are conditional.
Yes, that was
What are the net
what
benefits to everything?
ICJ is the internal net benefit.
And Ukraine.
Courts is Ukraine.
And the
Why
other
is
counterplans
I'm
just
sorry,
Ukraine.
hold up. Why is Ukraine a net benefit to the ICJ counterplan? Also just because it uses the executive?
Okay, okay, that's fine.
And the PCA counterplan?
I just said.
One more question. The Ukraine dissent. Okay, one last question about that other counterplan.
Which one?
Are the military one? Is each flank kickable, or do you have to go for the whole thing?
We'll go for the whole thing.
Okay. One sort of other question with ICJ. What is fiated? Is it fiated Obama complies?
No.
Okay, is it
Fiat
fiated-
submits it to compulsory jurisdiction.
Okay.
So
Is it
he-
fiated that
yeah,
the ICJ
court has
rules on
jurisdiction. No.
Okay. Now I want to go to T-restrict. So another sort of awkward moment, maybe even more awkward than us borrowing some 1AC cards. You read two definitions of restriction. You read one on the restriction specification that says restrictions are just limits. Why is your other T interpretation
Wait, where
preferred?
is
Yeah,
it?
so
We've
one
said
is a
restriction.
definition of restriction, the other one defines in the context of like congressional.
No, that's not true. You say statutory restriction is blank, judicial restriction is blank. The one I'm referencing.
Yeah, i.e. statutory is Congress and judicial are the courts.
No. Here, can you go to the specification page?
Yeah.
This,
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. So this
it says statutory restrictions
Are
require
limits-
congressional language. It says, I'm reading the
Yeah,
whole thing.
go ahead.
Statutory restrictions, limits or controls that have been put on place on activities by legislation.
Yeah.
Why
I
isn't the
think
plan
the
that?
Sheeler-Brown evidence then goes a step further and says in the context.
Okay, what
That
apps
should be
meet
interpreted as
both of
prohibited.
your T interpretations?
What that's made for the first interpretation?
Is it just 8 apps?
Yeah.
Eight
that
apps
would
for
be-
Okay,
T.
who reads any of
Wait,
those 8
time out,
apps?
time out. T prohibit equals only 8 apps, but T in the area equals any type.
Yeah,
of
but you have to defend them both together. It's fine. Who
We obviously
who
do
reads
rather.
who reads any of those 8 apps? Name one team.
No.
All of our apps are topical under T in the area.
No, I mean both. I mean T restrictions too. Who reads one of those 8
Well, we'll
apps?
go for one.
You
So.
don't have to go for one.
Okay, I'm asking about T restriction. Who reads any of those apps?
These aren't inconsistent.
No one, because of app picks.
Starting it?
I have a card to give to you. It's gonna be too long, but you'll just have to mark it, okay?
Where's that? Where's that?
Do you want it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I'm gonna highlight this until you're ready.
Okay. You want your shit in the folder? What? They're in like the doubles press folder, or are you looking at it a different one now?
No, I'm looking at
Courts, Solvency. Yeah.
Do you want me to email this just right up here?
president complies with the ICJ ruling that's
He
asked for?
submits himself.
He submits himself.
They said they do not. They do not.
They don't.
Compulsory jurisdiction is binding in the sense that the ICJ knew that and can use cumulative measures, but obviously we not feel like he will automatically.
Yeah, sure.
Apply. The counterclaim does feel like they can't withdraw from ICJ compulsory jurisdiction though.
That who can't?
So like,
The
oh, well,
president
when
cannot.
back.
So like
The
future
capital doesn't
presidents,
get
yeah.
back.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm done. Stop rock. 601. It's not. Where did you put this earlier?
I just slid this desk and made like a little square thingy. I got it.
Thanks. I'm not good at being coordinated. Okay.
Okay. That is.
Is everyone good for the order? Solvency, terror, PCI. T restriction is prohibition. T subsets. T, you didn't specify statutory or judicial. The ICJ counterplan. The court's counterplan. The PCA counterplan, the Ukraine dissad. Okay, solvency,
Okay.
terror, PCI, T restriction prohibition, T subsets, T specification,
Yep.
ICJ counterplan,
Okay.
court counterplan, PCA counterplan, Ukraine. Is anyone not ready? Okay, great. It's pretty tough for them to go for a decide when they drop that we will never use domestic detention, and the plan only codifies the status quo. The authority will never be used, and other countries already perceive that the authority will never be used either. And there's literally no decide that they can win out the terrorism, and they can drop the U.S. or Russia war cause extinction independently. That's try or die for the Av, no internal impact defense, and this independent nuclear terror together can be conventional terror too to cause internal impact. And yes, nuclear terror joint threat assessment is the consensus. Information technology spread makes it inevitable, and terrorists have the motive. That's one that also answers them no motive for bioweapons and the impact, and no bioweapons defense or my merfolk evidence says that their vaccine resistant advanced microbes, they're an increased lethality. That's why number followed of the external impact and the black up to the evidence to assume a dirty bomb materials could launch a conventional weapon against the terminal impact now. Detention, no cooperation, inevitable detention is already undermining deep and effective cooperation, causes extradition conflict, make the allies less likely to actively share intel. Co-op must be expanded to cut off finances and secure fringe areas like ports such as Chesney, Adwick, and Turkle, and EU courts will ban it. Barker told the global capital between the US and NATO is put in the alliance service. Detention during go between the US and allies attitudes are hurting European courts to restrict the future, and it's proven how the way 13 other countries are more willing to cooperate with terrorists, suspects trading, saving the US allies and unable to cooperate in cases involving detention, cooperating in criminal procedures, India, Germany for extradition, criminal coordinate justice, and extradition, international cooperation, sharing of evidence now. Yes, for some nuclear terror, I already explained this, yes, terminal impact to agriculture, it causes other countries to fight over resources, that's uniquely likely to draw the mandate as the key, and setting for driver for conflict now. PCA advantage, they've dropped most of the terminal impacts to this advantage. I only need to win that the PCA counterplan doesn't solve, or the whatever counterplan they go for doesn't solve in order to win. Hotspots, miscalculate, escalation, etc., deterrence all, cause nuclear war in the status quo, and none of this is answered now. T restrict. We meet the plan prohibits authority for domestic detention. It is an absolute ban. If we don't meet nothing does it kill safeguard topic education. We also read a T card in the 1AC that says we are a restriction, and restriction means limitation includes conditions. CAA, a restriction means limitation under commonly accepted definition or restricted statutorily required, and it's a best balance for CF to directly affect war powers established clear topic direction self not let's see choose about comic and deep topic literature. If this isn't topical, nothing defensible is error. Act massive structural theory bias in the K give them structural advantages, reasonabilities, best competing interpretations. Cause a race to the bottom. Also, here is a framing argument for all of their T interpretations. They cannot separately go for their T interpretations. All of this is holistic, and there has to be an app that meets all three of them in order for this to make any sense. Now, I'm going to T
They also
subsets.
contradicted their own restriction.
They also contradict their own restriction. Why?
The other page, it was cross-section. Just say cross-section.
Cross-sex proofs. Subsets. It means within, not through column 52. According to Webster's word, it means within the limits of actual word. It doesn't mean throughout. We are not aware of any authority described as doesn't mean to the word in any area includes parts, random house, 13 area, any particular surface, or a space apart and target demands or restrictions. Low below 8, Congress authorized the president to conduct warfare and place significant restriction, time, place, and manner. Congress regulated geographic area, specific purposes. Their evidence is also contrived in the context of UN resource mining. It has absolutely nothing to do with war powers, and they said the precision is key on a legal topic in itself. Grounded limits over the act defend legal changes, ensuring common mechanism based around the executive restraint, counterplane functional limits on small apps that don't have 30 key warrants in specific areas or inevitably altus picks, which is worse because the app has to produce specific evidence about each type. The negatives gets to direct which also grant key education, topic innovations, RDL journals, and all sales specific focus debating, access to new area of literature, key to education, and substantial means large rate of house 13 able to considerable amount of the plans. Authority, Richards 11, the NDA explains authority claimed by Obama. NDA substantially restricts the consecutive authority. NDA authorized detention said in the law will become the basis for aggressive interpretation, giving more and broader powers now. Go to restrictions back versus counter-interpretation. We can say the U.S. federal government used normal means to get to perm sophistication counterplans is best. They inflate agent counterplans, which are worse. They steal off-ground and hermit topic education, makes every Congress have to debate about the court counterplan, and every court have be a debate about the Congress have for counterplan. And app over specification destroys the negative. You could specify the judicial commission, congressional committees, and subcommittees and statutory and judicial T in a vacuum solve if the app said that they meet judicial restriction. The negative still gets all their court strategies in no resolutional basis involved in the senator's respect that limits out the app. It's not a voter, just forces to specify their education claims are also inevitable even without agent counterplans. The resolution is already about branches and branches checking each other. That solves their key in the context of legal debates and the arguments. We also can't no link out of disads by saying one or the other because we said that normal means and then approved links to disads, just that it didn't mean competition for counterplans. Now and we made some statutory authorization. Paul 11 NDA forces authority to obtain and said the authority includes informed permission. Taylor 96 capacity for change authority is given permission to the agent now to the ICJ counterplan perm to the counterplan not actually competitive Texas doesn't listen to check and voice words counterplan and the counterplan they'll defer to the US and avoid controversial decision review a current court is a likely decision regarding miscarriage disruption get decisions that are well received even House jurisdiction court refuse to pass on merits and relied on local remedies for respecting decision making by states that claim the best remedies resolution to be the US courts permits to remedy wrongs at the national level. Congress provides the court with the opportunity to decline dispute in conflict with strong constitutional autonomy and permit both conditionality is a voting issue especially egregious in this context because they read 3 conditional counterplans create time distraction to your argumentative responsibility and 1 conditional counterplan solves all their offense the counterplan doesn't solve clarity or certainly shady 12 international supervision or to suffer accountability deficits hampered by lack of expertise and may produce under-informed decision international reviews has to be half-hearted and uncertain perceived and to be biased extreme politicized and illegitimate and only something not a subject for domestic reveal. The combination offers effective and effective executive accession. They only fiat that the president submit Congress. It doesn't solve signal because the legislation determines the perception of domestic detention. That's Vlatic and Congress will say no. 12 in the word real detention decision authority being confused and difficult area to legislate House even more but critics believe that we don't trust Congress no matter who passes the law. All of a sudden say we were wrong. We're going to change that. Is a safe fed and perm submit to the ICJ and do the plain no matter what and ICJ credibility and legitimacy are high alter. There was no form of sanction judge not placed they were down rewritten ICJ from Nicaragua's line here beholder load continues to work compliance with the Consul Schultz growing ICJ's legitimacy is not compliance would be an option. The ICJ contentious cases that enhance credibility. The ICJ that will be useful and the US will not comply terms and that benefit Chelani 13 with long history not complying to the service of privacy able to join treaties after invasion as limited regardless of when the White House mandarins Nicaragua and important major powers really impose or violate or manipulate and ICJ also doesn't solve warming Copenhagen proves that it fails, and no extinction, Mendelsohn 9, news driven, short alarmist, and misleading, and visions about consequences of impacts recur for century 2. These effects will never occur because people will adapt on and prove that they need to be developed in longer climate risks. Where's that card that you sent me?
Here you go. Just read.
Environmental multilateralism fails Faulkner. 12 environmental and policy making into developments in Rose multilateralism is entering crisis policies fail to reverse or even show environmental trust whether international instruments make a difference made far from their policy making is led by global power struggles treaty future lost. This was notable at the Rio 12 plus 20. Now go to the court's counterclaim. This is awkward. They have no net benefit to this counterclaim that makes any sense. Their resolve link argument is definitely not only about the Congress. It says that if Obama looks like he's being restricted in his ability to use force abroad, that would send a bad signal. It also both shields link. That's also true of the ICJ. From to both shields link and part of the counterclaim. It doesn't solve the legislative signal as key. Congress perceived as not controlling detention and being able to force the hand of other branches. That was largely on the other counterclaim, and the court counterclaims not see this official policy to allow 12 is far from clear that the courts will seem exotic. That doesn't mean foreign governments view the court decisions as articulated by Congress judicial opinions or pronouncements on which to accept which some governments exaggerate and the offensive judicial decision further as policy positions as the government and Congress will respond by eliminating habeas. That's bad puzzled. 10 the war and terror prevents the court's complex issues. Due process, criminal social scripting for the Congress as Spain habeas altogether. Judicial review is more complicated than academic exercise to circumvent the word by statute. MTA was challenged and vomiting increasing likelihood of future attack on government just Spain habeas altogether. Agent counterplans or voter crushes fairness by doing all the F and undermines education by focusing on trivial details. Not spending much time here because I don't think that they can win a net benefit now. Go to the PCA counterplan. Firm to both. This obviously links to the DISAD too. They can't win a net benefit to this either. If their reason why the plan links to the Ukraine DISAD is that restricting domestic detention is perceived abroad, then restricting military capture and military training in the United States would also link to the Ukraine DISAD, and it doesn't solve PCA. Multiple internal links or jobs, not just training, but the overall resilience of the Posse Comitatus Act. Now, the Ukraine DISAD. This makes literally no sense. We would never use domestic detention for anything related to the Ukraine, and they don't have evidence about that, and Russia obviously doesn't perceive it in detention restrictions. Now, Buchanan 13-4 Supreme Court decision striking down power research department from Honda detainees filed Hamdi, U.S. citizens detainees about people to fight the fact that Djibouti held that MTA cannot deny full habeas to its detainees and no resolve over Ukraine. Now, Putin thinks the plan is a status quo. Thiessen 14 Obama issued a warning to Syria. Obama needed the backing for approval. It's the most embarrassing episode in history. Putin believes that Obama doesn't have the fortitude to stand up after Ukraine. He thinks that Obama will look for a way out of America's protecting weakness, failure in Syria, constant truck of withdrawal, and his decision to cut the budget for next week. And Putin believes that there will be no real cost for intervention. And weakness is structural. Backman 321. Putin may have more expansion to mind the U.S. response been tepid and ineffective for Russia. We get no sense and not quickening the sound of Obama's voice. Putin objected to missile defense. Obama agreed to scrap the project when Obama talked himself into a corner on Syria, freedom from Russian energy because we don't have infrastructure to America's policies. Obama's weakness is encouraging Putin's aggression and no terminal impact. Clark 14 Ukrainian crisis won't lead to World War III. Ukraine has not been an option. Economic isolation been subordinated for political support. The U.S. extremely unlikely military doctrine, a significant deterrent. U.S. and Soviet Union were aware of the consequences while held nuclear capacity. The possibility of confrontation was very low. Go back to the ICJ counterplan. International checks won't be enforced. It doesn't solve clarity. Cheney 12 international supervision has an array of deficiencies. International separate from accountability deficits. They provide the lack of expertise and produce under-informed decision for agency. Haphazard, uncertain, perceived to be biased, extremely politicized, and illegitimate. International supervision can only supplement, not substitute. Domestic review only the combination can offer effective and executive access, and especially on detention issues. Perry 12 Americans embrace policies that undermine international law on detention. The vast majority reject the applicability of international law when it comes to the war on terror. Americans generally support international courts. This is what the U.S. has been doing for Guantanamo in the areas that they're willing to disregard international law. Also. If they say that the counterplan at any point results, and then the plan results in Congress saying yes, that's an independent voting issue. It's impossible to predict. There are infinite ways to recommend the plan. We also can't read saying no evidence against ourselves, and it would also link to the DISAB. The last two cards were the last two cards in the ICJ block. I just skipped them before, and then I went back to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so your. So the Eb you read on co-op low now, part you don't read, with the continued use of military conditions.
Allied co-op, you mean? Sure.
Yeah.
Go on.
Continued use of military commissions and indefinite detentions is driving a wedge between the U.S. to resolve other uses of military. Well, we've already established that nobody's being domestically detained.
Yep, I'm there.
The U.S. is using military commissions now. Why does the plan solve that?
Well, okay, a couple of warrants. First is that our Atwood card is pretty good on the question of why.
2AC Parker evidence that you have read that says that military commissions are undermining the alliance. How does the plan solve that?
Right. I'm kind of getting there. Multiple internal links. First is 1AC Atwood card says that domestic detention
Which
is
from a
perceived.
2009 amicus brief.
I'm
from
trying to
Hawaii.
explain the internal links. Yes, you're right. It's from an amicus brief. Amicus briefs often write really good cards because they're advocating that the court do something. Point being, the multiple internal links. Number one is that the reason why domestic detention is unique is because it's perceived as a particularly egregious departure from rule of law. If we say that we're even willing to detain our own citizens or people within our own country, it looks like we have absolutely zero regard for rule of law. The second internal link in that card is that our allies are afraid that if their citizens come visit the United States, that they are at risk of being detained.
So I guess my question then is the same one that Melanie had for the 1AC. If it's true that this statute's been on the books since 2001, why has our cooperation not collapsed?
Well, that's like a uniqueness argument for us. Our Chesney 13 card says that it is collapsing now, and that the plan is key to resolve the fact that it is collapsing now.
2013. Why did it not collapse in the 8 months since?
Okay, when we talk about relations, it's difficult to talk about like collapse. Like relations are being
right, but we
strained
read
now.
that from
They will
September that
inevitably
says that.
collapse if we don't do something.
Which piece of evidence do you think makes the predictive claim that
It's also
they
not
will
simply,
collapse?
our argument is not simply that they will collapse, it's that they will be ineffective. Even if we have relations with our allies, they certainly won't be able to do things like stop financing networks for terrorists, secure
Okay,
ports,
so I think-
gather intel, etc.
Okay,
We don't need to
given
win that
that-
they stop
okay,
being allies.
Given that I cut this half, I think the best line
We
you
cut
have
this
is
half too. I mean, like,
security
and separate
officials
cards than you
elsewhere
did.
who
Go on.
become greatly alarmed and have difficulty and more friction in their cooperation. Why does that mean we collapse intel?
Okay, we've been like making this distinction between collapse and effectiveness. We don't need to win
Okay.
that they will no longer be our allies. We
Sure.
only need to win that our cooperation will not be successful enough to
so
disrupt terrorist
the Chesney
networks.
evidence says friction and cooperation. Why do you think that means that becomes ineffective? Like what breaks the threshold of effectiveness?
What breaks the threshold? Well, it's simply that if they don't trust us, they won't do things like share intelligence with us. We, like, right hand won't know what the left hand is doing,
share
etc.
intelligence. Which piece of evidence do you think makes that claim in the one?
The Turkle card?
Turkle?
Turkle lists like a bunch of internal links, one
No,
of which is
Turkle
intel
says
sharing, one
co-op.
of which is financial networks, one of which is like
copy,
port
I got that.
security.
Turkle says co-op solves terrorism. Which piece of evidence do you think says that they do not intel share with us?
The Chesney card.
It
The
says,
Chesney card combined with the Turkle card
it
say
says
that
friction and
frictions will
cooperation.
make that inevitable in the status quo. The plan is key to reverse that.
I understand. I understand. Yeah. Like these.
Just saved it.
I understand. I agree.
Hey, Fabio, what's the 1AC Congress key card? Did you say Vlad?
Yeah. It was the last card that you read.
Chesney's also pretty.
The like codification card. Right, that too.
Yeah. Are those course cards highlighted? I have not seen until now. Okay, I highlighted them.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, that's what everything in there.
I agree. Nope, that's fine.
3:30. I'm gonna run to the bathroom. Well.
No, did you send this already?
I just,
Okay.
How much work do you have left, Molly?
328 is my phone.
I haven't gotten anything yet, but
You mind if I move your stand up here, Todd?
yeah, sure.
Pretty sure that's ours.
It is your stand, in fact. We have no stand. Our stand was left in Lexington, Kentucky, and we did not get a new one. We were cut off.
Did you believe yesterday I told you that they didn't have it right?
Oh my god, okay, and I got stuck in that line for like forever, and then I had to make it over to Wishfish, and everyone was waiting for me. It was awful.
Drew?
Sure. Ah. Found it. Give me a sec to open it. Okay, dokes.
I need a sec. I'm sorry.
Primer? Do you have a primer?
I think.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm good now.
Alright, T in the area. T prohibits the ICJ counterplan, the courts counterplan, the terrorism page, and CMR.
Hang on. T subsets, T restriction. What was after that?
The ICJ counterplan,
Uh-huh.
courts, terror,
Courts. Terror.
CMR.
PCA.
Sorry.
Is anyone not good? Sorry.
Interpretation topic as for the entire topical series. There's a reason we broke this application. You only read it once because we knew you were not able to go for T and the 2 and R, which was pretty argument. It's not a topical application for our interpretation defines it in the area, the context of jurisdiction is the most accurate. Even if the sentence is not the most accurate, they have not deferred a more precise interpretation. They've define the word in and then the word area, which obviously is not any more precise than our interpretation. It's a question of who has the best interpretation. You can see the limits here, which I'm going to get to in a second. We should refer our interpretation. It means throughout the context of jurisdiction words and phrasing, right, justice, and also jurisdiction in the word in should be considered to be throughout such their evidence about physical state's authority is a jurisdictional question set. Legal briefing noted the best administrative jurisdiction of the area define control over jurisdiction. The act cannot possibly be they define a specific subset of the area. The term topical acts include any type of restriction. The law doesn't have to be a prohibition, but the restriction must be applied over the entire area. Topical acts include peace, release, national security, court, article 3 courts, etc. But what I'm going to do are offense here first, allowing for acts to restrict individual countries or areas or types of detention or a massive limits of The math is pretty easy. 2 actors times 4 top areas times 184 countries has multiple restrictions equals over 1,000 housing. Examples of individual detention acts include things like do not detain Yemenis people, do not detain Uyghurs, all the individual countries or anybody who's detained from an ally to assault the allies. Those are all unpredictable. Do not check. This is also for the rest of the topic. The examples of other topics BNTK in specific regions of Pakistan do not allow for Obama to attack A people, let him attack ACAT, restricted detaining terrorists from Yemen, make Obama release Uyghurs. This is a key concession from the 2 who shove about the 2 who shove about the conceded the ground argument that having the little tail nitpicking is but poor negative ground because all of the best counterplay competition does that lead to about broader assertions of authority that happen. So even if we have a bunch of different mechanism counterplays, all that results in always having more specific link to it, especially at the NDT when there's no politics, since you should not allow them to run away to the margins of the situation for mechanism focus over the area focus. No one cares about detention being good or bad. The question is what is the best method. They just focus to go for impact trends over those types of things rather than the mechanism for which is the most interesting part of the topic. I am going to answer their offense here. First is not the first is the argument of ground, which I just said was about. The second is the picture argument, but
the signal and have potential and functional competition. I mean, if it is true that these picks are equally as bad as they say they are, obviously nobody ever vote for them. You just go for theory and every judge will vote against it. The second argument is the overlimiting argument. There is no thing overlimits. We've already tried to talk about that, but even if they win something that we may be a little bit overlimiting, sure for it, it's more depth of to Bader's and Porter's reading is giving thousands of articles and never get the point of debate on these. We run out any work to this. The majority of the topic in the areas we do have any technical or in-depth discussion because after you race to the margin, it's not allowed for engagement. Rather, it just becomes negative after we recycle Kansas after the highlighting of the one you see that I highlighted myself back in us, which is not rewarding them for having to be so much rewards debaters to work hard and digging out research no matter how hard you try to limit topics. It's impossible for any individual to create success without the help of a large squad, or even having a large squad doesn't mean you have a coaching staff or team that are committed to cutting cards or termination rewards free riders who happen to be a large team that walks out everything for them. You should have gotten this victory to ends up competing interpretation, anything else. A race to the bottom is possible to establish any other interpretation. Also, leaves one substantial limits to their dissent. Look, they define substantial, which is just proof they should probably vote against one T. Substantial is not in the resolution. Try again. T prohibit. Yes, we can go for the individual TR just because you won that the apathy restriction does not have any area. There's two separate distinction parts on the topic. It's an inquiry arm. Go to the ICJ camp. The ICJ can accept the permutation is the test of competition. Not going for a say no arguments, not going to be subject to reject the team, just reject the arguments. I'm not going for condition. Now you can interpret communicating conditional apathies versus new apps. One does not solve any of our offense because it's a new app, which means we did not have any pre-round testing. New abandoned, new plan, new affect changes the standard condition. One is the in-round testing. We have 30 seconds to determine the competition right attack and figure out that benefit allows for one to see flexibility. Second is multi-angled attack, attacking the plan from multiple perspectives enhances. Third is negative flexibility. After structural advantage, topic bias, conditionality is the necessary corrective for this logic. Right, be counter and bad does not mean the plan is good. Just reject the argument. Also, no link to their contradiction arguments. Everything, and we want to see consistent. One was a question of what the actor is, and the second was the area of your restriction, which we have done. Go to the course camp. Like, oh my God, the course camp wants all the entirely after. There's a reason we read this exactly once because we knew Bunsen is probably sitting on the wall read this in the courts all the entirely after. Well, read that card here. You heard that card here. Erickson, Matthew 13. No, to be clear statement principles implies the aim of potential lawyer but one move to detain him to rest of the United States. The case which should not be reading foreclose the application of clear statement the principle the aim of the aim is ambiguous and does not specify whether we should individual capture use territory Congress decline to resolve this question. Court should resolve this question by applying a clear statement requirement. No, or use that the statutory interpretation consistently required. I think the cause for telling when Copy did not know what aim of his brief was. Here is more evidence. Brownlee attend the imposition of clear statement required. Here to be justified is not clear why the treatment of any agents superior depending on whether to seek it to the United States is not clear. Why military agents are higher in the Amari case than the Hamdi. Go to the line by line debate. Yes, all our links will be out of Congress, which further will say the decide debate. However, also the decision announced in May, which is after the Ukraine crisis, because the decision is happening now. It has been told the court maintains schedule until all cases have been heard decided in May and June. The court is only announcing orders. The next argument is that Congress is not able to, it doesn't lead to congressional follow-up, but it does, in fact, restrain the executive. D13 executive national security court policy have changed statements in 2001 due to the shadow effect passed without a court decision. Court decisions national security rank have a wider ripple effect because executive instead of trying to preserve the issue of Solvency could refer to policy because the policy did not engage systemically to shape the policy market. Policy permutation bill does not shield the link the still requires congressional action. They am conceding from the specification picture. There is a statutory restriction to see Congress and not legislature action is key, but we have evidence in the courts are broader and signal decision evidence is not making sense. Congress will not strip because they've never actually authorized Obama to explicitly do that. It's just his rogue interpretation. Agent counterplans are key to test the topic on a legal topic. Active choice is the key decision-making process, particular against the pros. You have the defense, the statutory restriction key to keep solving. Worse to redirect the argument, not the team. Terror advantage. Maybe I was not smart enough to recut the Chesney card, but fortunately, the 2AC read the cards for me. Parker 12 evidence, all cause. The escalated use of unmanned unmanned area vehicles to strike terror suspects the increasing number of operational environments in the Arabian Peninsula, the Southeast Asian coupled with continued use of military commissions to indefinite detention is driving the wedge. It's also proven by their halfway evidence. There is clear evidence that other countries recognize the response to the difference in legitimacy between civilian and military courts, and they are indeed more willing to cooperate with these counterterrorism efforts when the terrorists are trying to use criminal justice system. They insist on using military commission must hinder and the system must hinder military commission must hinder extradition and other international prosecutor corporations such as the sharing of testimony evidence. Also the 1AC turtle weapons from 2004 with no weapons of mass destruction found in the Iraq race of peace and all purposes of prison, no place to be landed in the US and Iraq and most or has been trusted the Bush administration better marshal the foreign peace over European Middle East countries of majority and some of that nations military believe use British leaders side about the Iraq war. No risk of the terminal impact of newest evidence of hex evidence from less than week use of loose nuclear material has been secured through things like the PSI new security cooperation agreements with the Russians of very low chains also gets the motivation of hate already announced that they want nuclear weapons before 2001 they increase security and by the time there's a difference between capability and motive. They are more turned toward small tech bioweapons does not We do extinction leads to burnout. Either A, leads to burnout because the disease spreads way too fast, so it will not increase the entire population, or B, so when it's very slow, we are able to develop vaccines that also happen. Even if you decide to take large risk of the terminal impact of the disease events or inherently probabilistic of detention, authorities not huge, already excited about. Also, we control the uniqueness. Do I want to read this card? I do not. Arguments evidence indicate the EU in total corporation high review 3 less than because detention authority has been on the books since 2001, which is the reason we're not reading this app anymore because there's no uniqueness to this type of threshold. Because we will either A, it's been on the books which triggers all the impacts, or B, we have to wait for somebody to detain it, which is never going to happen. As for your evidence, go to the CMR and go to the CMR advantage. CMRs are taken out seriously with sequester fever and 1014. The news that I got short second down to welcome to the CMR. The Ukraine beheading Iraq with civil military relations. CMR has not been since the Cold War. The militaries having the White House now see the Western report directly similar to the consequence should be highly skeptical of their impact. If it is true that we've been training for the military military use against civilians inside the United States. Because ever since it's been on the book, because there's a possibility, A, I think you're greatly underestimating the military. Chief's evidence indicates we have a wreck of nuclear weapons, a wreck of armed forces. We're controlling every single military form of dominance. A, acts as an independent deterrent effect, versus India's conflicts are rising. And B, subpoint also proves that we were able to multitask. Clearly, we're not taking every single foreign, every single tank and all those operators just to go ahead and do civilian attacks. Second is uniqueness frame. This has been on the book since 2010, so the cross-expertise is unclear. If it is true, it's just a question of, it's an option on the table. The last 13 years should prove this, or 2, you have to wait for somebody to detain them when their own evidence and the 2AC concession rights made on the Solvency page all indicate you will never ever use this authority to begin with. So no act. Bertha, can you kick out of the editing camera?
It's okay. You good? So it's weird. You make this argument on picks about why the pick would only be competitive if the AF put the word all in the plain text.
Yeah.
But your interpretation is that they have to be all. Like, that doesn't make sense. Under your interpretation, they wouldn't need to put all in the plain text because they necessarily already have to be all.
Right, but I think you see to win a standard for textual and functional competition is important.
But how could it be competitive if, in order to be topical, the AF needs to be the
win a reason
entire
why
area?
Textual function and competition is also important. Also, these counterplans are anywhere near as bad as you say they are. Clearly, no judge in the right mind would ever vote on it.
Okay, but all of your arguments about how it's unpredictable and there are like thousands of these small AFs, etc., prove that you just shift the burden to the AF and create thousands of small picks, etc., right?
The
Like,
AF
it's just
is
as
constrained by
unpredictable.
they get to pick the AF and loopholes arguments, which are very easy to win against.
But loopholes arguments
Second,
also
if
mean
you
that the
win a
neg always
theory
wins on
argument.
circumvention. Like,
What?
loopholes arguments honestly aren't very good against
There's
these
no
counterplans
circumvention if
because
you
it just
restrict
means
the
the neg
entire area,
circumvents the
Fabio.
plan.
What possible circumvention is if the restriction applies to the entire area?
Well, okay, they can't read loophole solvency deficits is what I'm saying, because
No,
the
they
reason why
can.
those solvency deficits are bad is because that proves that the negative the president will circumvent the plan. Like, if loopholes is true, a lot of AFs lose debates on
can't
this.
have loopholes because they're the entire area. You cannot both say that the counterplan doesn't solve because of loopholes, but the AF can't win because of loopholes.
Okay,
Only one of them creates a loophole.
I guess I want to get back to this question of like predictability though and research burden.
Yep.
If there are thousands of picks, do we not still have to do research on them either way? It's just a question of which team has
No,
to do the
because
research.
if they're truly that unbeatable and terrible for the AF, clearly judges will vote against them.
Okay, but the neg at least gets to debate about the mechanism
Plus,
of the
you have-
plan.
What?
The neg gets to debate about the mechanism
No,
of the
we
plan,
don't.
but the AF
So
can't debate
none
against
of
their
these
own
mechanisms
mechanism.
are written in the context of individual little tiny areas like the list area I've done. All of those are written in broader authorizations
broadly-
like consultation versus declaration, etc.
Okay,
The
Mel,
only
but
way-
broadly, the negative can read counterplans to
Right,
test the
counterplans
mechanism
do
of the
not
plan.
matter.
The
They
AF
do not
cannot
have
debate
the
against their
benefit
own
caveat.
mechanism.
Under your interpretation, the AF will always have more specific link evidence, both for politics generics and also any of the disad links. Because, for example, if we read a consultation versus declaration counterplan for an armed forces AF, and our net benefit was flex, the AF would be like, oh, we're only North Korea. You
Right,
better
but
vote
if
for
the net
thing,
benefit
also
is
the
politics,
full
there
disad
really
to
is no
North Korea.
good country-specific politics link term. Like,
No, okay. You just read North Korea and link terms versus us in
They were
the
bad.
Optos of USC. They were
we admit it. I'm gonna move on though. Ukraine disad and counterplan. You make the argument that the decision will just be announced in June. Do you really think that the Ukraine crisis is going to be resolved?
So it's
before
not a question
June?
of the crisis, but our 1C evidence, which you conceded, says he will make a decision by the end of the weekend.
Make a
That's
decision
Monday.
on what though? Like, this presumes
About
that
whether
there
or
will
not
no
he
longer
invades
be a
Ukraine.
conflict past like May. That
Obama
seems
is
silly. It's
currently
gonna be
visiting
drawn out.
Europe. He will leave Monday night from that visit.
Right, but that doesn't
is
mean
how
the
long he has
conflict
to hold
ends
resolve.
with the
This is
meeting.
what?
That doesn't mean the conflict ends with the meeting.
Well,
that
it
we no
does
longer need to
because
show
you
results. That's
conceded that
silly.
if we have a successful meeting, there's no conflict.
Okay.
Send that out. The advantage counterplan and then the Ukraine decision.
Was it like 10 seconds? Or 5 seconds?
Sure, right. Yeah.
Do you just want to, sorry, my OCD is like off the handle right now.
How about 7 seconds?
I love it.
Okay. Is anyone not ready?
I'm sorry, what's the order?
The advantage counter plan and then the Ukraine dissent.
CA counter plan. I'm sorry, let me find my Ukraine bill. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Go for it.
Cool. Counter plan over reputation test conversation about inadequacy. There's a reason to reject the argument not now. The Ukraine dissent on restraining Russian aggression causing nuclear power release to extinction timeframe. This weekend's key lab clip to find another day. AU News 328 Europe citizens staring down the barrel of experienced forces. 1945 versus our nation Russia forces mass on the border boys. You invade by the end of the weekend when war will begin. Or you will just start to send troops on declared from Russia. The naval war happening to the nation. Chandler is not the only active question this concern magnitude. Other wars don't lead to extinction and account for future generations. Possible true nuclear or responsible to substantial power, but consequences qualified as global terms of nuclear arms against the annihilator species Russia in the U.S. retaining to large nuclear arsenals to small nuclear change, not action to offensive. It would not destroy humankind power. Four strategies won't work. All nukes will be used. LPAC. There's much to do with the war immediately. The process will be European intelligence and completely global thermonuclear reparations are your categories right by sex track, they won't work means miscalculations, no impact defense, lose 228 will Russia. The field of things can lead to miscalculation of everybody needs to. But provocations, steps to be misinterpreted or leave miscalculations during a very delicate time treaty. Allegations to church draw no chance of staying minor. Weaver 3. But if you consider Ukraine's neighbors or NATO members, any of those countries violence themselves in North Russian neighbors they love obliged to intervene. That should also true if the Russian invading of those countries. If we learn anything from World War I, that here's one of the questions to start with small skirmishes, essentially in Europe now line the land by line. They say it doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. Presenting the United Front of Obama and Congress is key to ensure Russia. They follow the United States and respond to because results important. Even if the counterplan links less because there are no fights between Congress and Obama. The plan leads to restrictions that opens the floodgate for new restriction and criticism. Defending against Congress rebuke leads to diplomatic collapses, diplomatic credibility. Congressional participants, staff, industry, from other nations by first president to defend the international legitimate political gains, capital women, to introduce short support for the president, foreign policies, and development, producer, next partisan, loss of corporate conference, further ministry, morals, and gender, Bush, second term, best states to domestic waste properties failed, the best administration, after use financial legitimate, regard action against congressional, presidents consider congressional opposition to their policies, legislative restrictions, sending a signal of an unsupported Republican support, undercuts the credibility of U.S. resolve, how 13 when it comes to action, the president enjoys extraordinary power, even short domestic should be on white states, how Congress had legislative action against the president, even in the absence of formal congressional criticism, in turn, the obligation against the president, the signal to enemies life result in justice and congressional action and other aspects of the right to president's policy agenda. Now, all answer their argument about codifying the status quo. It links more because it leads to presidential resistance. Obama will fear the legislative process might produce additional restrictions and lead to unnecessary partisan fights. Guarantees resistance and a fight in all 13 where you're relying on constant Congress unvarying leaders who are social and additional officers, institutional relatives, or anyone who might have to pursue congressional action if it believes the president already has constitutional authority. Legislative becomes politicized Congress. They achieve the opposite of the result of standing Congress here to have little appetite and act politically sensitive issues and likely to call for legislation. Likely impose statutory requirements that do not show to by the president with discretion. They say restrictions now. Their evidences about court cases from 2004, 2005, and 2008 obviously doesn't take out any of this because it happened too long. Doesn't impact the current situation. Also, about the course, not statutory restrictions. They say no results. Saying now Obama's posture to negotiate with UN resolve high against Russia now for post-dating deficits. TB 329 Obama. Big power to whites in the Puerto Rican work peace that should not be able to love the crisis. Is serious Russia citizens develop to get diplomatic space to the outlet. Modern situation can and should be multiple policy going for yesterday's phone calls into strong signal EN 329 during a phone call between Obama saying tough stance with further consequences. Number says or on the table Russian U.S. and U.S. official will be to discuss a diplomatic action results. High now sufficiently deters Russia. Obama strong with France 324. Obama Asia and now Ukraine is Europe back to the center of U.S. Where foreign policy become consequential transatlantic diplomacy on the North American leadership that's exactly the ones of the U.S. Exert strong leadership eager to engage one where they say that weakness is structural. That was partially answered above Obama struck down in the diplomatic solution will come to a position that has strength deters Russia now. Key get us 326 as a priority. Obama can be a head point history. It's uses so enemies on those views. It's shortly now possession board of North America, lunch order during the partnership between us, not possible to move how now, the word cross-borders of Obama's response to you has taken an incredible character that real test is now what he is meeting with that with allies in Europe. Obama's revitalized the allies in the Western influence may refer to this in the first course. That will be bad news for the most churches. That's the priority now. U.S. and Ukraine are converging on a diplomatic solution proves that results effective for all in Catherine Herzenberg 329 in the ever. You agree after the Greece, you really shout out to the Obama says that Russia, the U.S. we were there and there for just a solution of all had Obama you have prompted all the we are bringing our different approaches together. Also joined this issue is taking place. Negotiations are working now during 329 Russia's meeting. U.S. meeting the result of dispute in Ukraine. Changing tackle behalf of U.S. money diplomatic efforts are gaining traction now. They say no. In fact, yes. In fact, Russia's posturing tensions are high causes drawn. That would all love specifically causes Chinese aggression in the SCS and in this 327 national Russian domestic support by demonstrating that in exception for currency for that not be told to call we have a dangerous moment in history of all consequences of the world's changing China. Looking at this territory and says this is South China Sea when Western respond we promote this establishment first of the world through these challenging times causes extinction. Wesley talking to West until that suggests SCS is the much one warrior break down no establishment both managing it is the states take our especially double up in problems that naturals and accidents are likely to escalate the war happen and escalate quickly until in March 327 Russian troops are taking massive action here using nation here Ukraine are establishing wildlife that creates these used for long deployment such as the incursion state without because Russia already 1% need for operation rapid speed of the build so the U.S. position in the advantage sites quickly lose Spanish state or best season more force more territory.
We got 601. Yeah.
minutes left. I'm done. Email out right now. you good?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Oh, no, I was like,
Yeah,
wait. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going.
Okay. T, PCA, Tear, courts in Ukraine. There's an overview on T, but it's like, nah, whatever. There's like no cards. Anyone not good? Sweet. Area means a part of an means within couple conceded offense. First, the topic innovation just said is interlinked to other depth claims because we never talk about portions of the topic like the cyber or hostilities portion. We have to have a creative topic. They can see the uniqueness claim the topic is stale in the status quo means that it has to have innovation. Anything that worse than everything only allows 8 affirmatives that make it literally impossible for us to innovate. Next to another instance, the second is our precision arguments. They've conceded that their interpretation is about the UN mining resolution 0. Contextual events of the affirmative plan 100% arbitrary. First is the UN business. Also is the definition of words, things like words and phrase, which is insufficient to prove the contextual relevance topic. Even if our stuff is not spot on, it is their burden to have more precise evidence because that is their job to prove that we are not topical. You should presume that we are topical coming in the first place. Now, third is all of our ground arguments. They open the affirmative to picks that are literally unbeatable because of the arguments like loopholes. I'll get to their arguments in a second. Now, they're wrong about the precision standard. Even if the 1 and C one has some arguments that are about mining, which is not contextually useful evidence that is an intent to define contextual only. Our evidence meets that burden. Also, things like substantial evidence proves that we're able to solve. Now, their limits to SAD is exaggerated. It's entirely appropriately ESR literature and words like substantial are able to solve and check back against any forms of offense. Their ground argument doesn't make sense because it uses things like politics or the court's disadvantage, which are sufficient to have at least some forms of ground. You can read the amendments codified. That is definitively a tank on any topic. Also, their NDT argument is lame. They missed the entire underview of the one affirmative. Indicates that this is your own affirmative. It is core of the topic. Search indefinite detention. The first thing will come up with domestic detention. That proves that it is a relevant discussion to have. It is differently predictable because you read it against us. Means that if you are so willing that you highlight these cards, you should be good in the first place. Now, the definition is made in does not mean throughout. Strauss is a big guy, but he certainly is never throughout a room. Even if he's in a room, it is entirely illogical. Which brings to all of our precision-based arguments. They've conceded the area distinction means that random houses proves that it can be a part of the contextual accusation. Their own evidence indicates there's multiple definitions of area that they cherry pick and are unable to competitive. They say the picks are not competitive. That is theory 2I of our. Also, their interpretation of the substantial means that we can never say the nearly all distinctions make the loophole arguments disprove the affirmative because it would link to all the circumvention arguments. Also, if the tie, also if it's tie, you should err affirmative because we can't debate against ourselves with these picks. They can at least read them. Now, their yes impact over limiting. They've conceded the uniqueness question of the topic. Now, you should prefer questions of reasonability. They only asserted in judge intervention is inevitable. We solve for substantive credit. Also, we are the key race to the middle to solve for these particular questions. They say substantial is not the resolution, even if that's true. It's a general check that's able to solve for an error question. Now, the PCA advantage.
Restriction is a targeted ban.
They've also conceded the restriction is a targeted ban. That proves it can be an individual portion. That is the only contextual evidence in this debate. Now, the PCA advantage. They can see triad. They can't go for the status quo magnitude. Comes first. The only irreversible impact. Only we solve military transformation. Only of our LED's impact evidence. CMR is not responsive because we have other things like resolve another narrow question like the transformation in the first place. Now, this takes out the entirety of their dissad because it says that resolve is sufficiently high in the status quo. They talk about how strong nuclear deterrence is. That should be able to solve for other Russia-based questions. Also, it's a sliding scale question. Their evidence is too old. It means that CMR is insufficient. Now, the terror advantage concede it had grid impact and interlinked to the U.S.-Russia war channel impact means we turn your dissad, and the grid means that we're less vulnerable. It makes it look more vulnerable, which caused Russian aggression in the first place. Yes, nuclear terrorism. They've conceded that because of globalization, they're getting it now. They can build the technology, even if they've already been solved. They have no evidence on motive. Our bun evidence is better, and the joint authority is substantially better than narrow questions. Now, yes, extinction and bioterrorism burnout only assumes a single attack. There can be multiple and different diseases there would be able to spread. Cooperation is insufficient in the status quo. It's also nonsense. We've read more evidence as high now. The Parker evidence and halfway conclude that the EU would ban these. They hate them. It's also not a question of just whether they break ties. It's a question of effectiveness.
Extend our local co-op.
Also extend local cooperation, like that's entirely conceded. That's sufficient to solve for the dissent. Now go to the court's counterplan. Top level, they've conceded permutation to do the counterplan. They also extended their restriction arguments. Means that it's impossible to solve plan exhibit to an action. Counterplan is a clarification. USFG is in all branches. Chicago and 7 government is not a single entity referred to as the federal government. As fitted by operating the government, Congress, Senate, the state, etc. Also is not technically competitive. It must be both. Most objective voice of world's counterplans. Also normally competition is bad. Counterplan is must be mandated. Force the affirmative to prepare for an evident abnormal means justifies the counterplan to print the plan or recycle paper. Also kills the search for best policy option. An increase means greater result in code and 6 make become greater. Courts make law. Messy and 86 Supreme Court decision of generally applicability to dividing parties and a decision binding the press and lower for the courts will sit court's decision by the courts are law occurring in the first place. Now definitely links to the net benefit if they are correct that it is not split. They solve 0 of our delay arguments. It's also insufficient. Ukraine crisis will be prolonged 414 beyond the immediate crisis alone. Make sure if it's deadline elections, but itself could be its affect Ukraine election create collateral damage which comes to come after the election and the active crisis over Ukraine will go to face of predictable crisis take a month if not years to work the way out of in the first place. Now legislation is definitely key. You can see the Vladeck evidence indicates Congress is shoving it down Obama's throat right now. That's perceived by other individuals and doesn't solve hands to deny congressional momentum too late. If Congress only actually being out of the course of preaching against the breaking point as regarded as teleworking Congress back and forth to waste for the Congress in Congress engaged after the effects of relevant institutions under my Congress brought to the checks and balances of our system will not work. Congress will be relegated to a second tier institution in the first place. It also goes under the radar. Peters and 2K just for reasonable celebrity the educated liberation and self-prepared correction court may fly under the radar in the first place. What?
That's fine.
Ukraine just said no try or die. We have internal link defense. Also magnitude impact outweighs it's on the case. They don't are not able to access the Bostrom. Bostrom came out after this and said he thinks that it's not the biggest thing. Also, Hardy, you should know from our Spark debate that he has a litany of other things like large hydrogen colliders should be bigger. Question: the case access is all their miscalculation arguments and outweighs. They also no turns case where it's just alternative causes. Prefer the specific solvency of these narrow questions. No SES impact. They'll never go to war. Caveat lost at Hughes. Get me that.
Just say that territorial
disputes never spill over. That was conceded from the ICJ counterplan because we read that ICJ will solve. There's no chance of a link to this advantage. None of their evidence assumes the contextual question of detention-based questions. They have no evidence that restrictions are insufficient in the sense where the Kreiner evidence not unique to pass restrictions and does the Howell evidence now. They say restrictions definitely come now. They're haphazard and worse. Wits and 90. U.S. Assembly towards the interstitial terrorism through the combination nations creating arguments to the war until the question whether that institution take place, whether it will take place or haphazard in the U.S. will create through the institution which is with love and the sequence of the justification shape the Congress is signal the role playing the institutionalization. No chance of circumvention. Conceded one and see Chesney evidence that Obama wants it is coming now. The resolve numbers or TBM evidence is what we should do now that their phone evidence talks about sanctions are solving. That means that it isn't sufficient to solve the little French evidence says that it needs to be new regulations. They have no negotiation evidence. Their negotiation says that there's a common process, but it's insufficient to solve the status quo. Also, is shot now. Conan 2-12-14. What concerns the erratic system? The Syrian policy randomized pronounced when they ignore the balls drowned in the labor creation leading for the least a couple of things. Consensus use starting inwards Bruce stability Koreans worry Japan worry the European allies worry.
The last part was the 323.
Yeah.
323.
starting with 5 means one's expendable. There are stock issues. Oh, I guess Kansas is more about stock issues.
Wisconsin has the inherency, though.
Yeah.
I guess Kansas has the yeah, never mind, yeah.
Actually, you probably can. Can you name other things in here?
Yeah, attitudinal, structural, and
Existential.
ah, damn. I've been gone too long.
Alright, the order is the Ukraine DA, the board treatment plan, the air page, and then, no, actually make that the CMR page.
Okay, sorry. Ukraine decide, port counterplan, PCA, terror.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
PCH.
Yeah.
Alright, anyone not good?
The one of our is made massive mistake by 8.9 centimeters had a terminal impact defense 2. The Russian is that this is the power ring, the 2 is part of the 1 AC. You raise the threshold to extinction by 1 single nuclear bomb. Obviously, the 2 largest superpowers control 95% of the nuclear isolated, but obviously is a much larger, or at least an equivalent internal link to the app. Based on point is the time frame. You can see the deal is happening now. Obama is currently visiting Europe. He has to be prepared to resolve during the trip will last till Monday or Tuesday, which means Mr. Resolve, which means if that deal fails, Obama has to either come home because of the fight or Russia calls him out on it because he cannot get Congress to back him up. That will cause a collapse of the deal. Diplomatic solution stay blocking Russian war at the very least that happened outweigh the app. Very first to tell you could only die once, which means we should prioritize saving your ass right now, and maybe you can deal with a nebulous terrorist or a nonsensical detention app, which has never ever not been authorized for over 14 years, and which apparently $2 impacts. B at some point is that none of their impacts have been supplied. The only car that could possibly cross supply is from the 2AC Clark evidence. First, it says that there's no political support. You haven't seen it, the web evidence, a treaty obligation, sure. You don't talk domestic political support. If any of the NATO alliance members or Russia were to invade one, either way, the U.S. is obligated to respond. Draws miscalculation. Second, more to the Clark evidence is the mutual deterrence. We can see the miscalculation state high as a high risk of escalation, high risk of escalation now because they are uncertain about territorial lands which are happening in Russia, Ukraine, the Caribbean region, which all is going to escalate. Then go to the left. The restrictions now. Look, this evidence is about a bunch of old court restrictions from Hamna, which the most recent one happened in 2008. I would know because it is the 2AC card birds are once again cut in red against you all. Second, it says second is we were totally make this resolve. I know Obama can sufficiently deter Russia and it's leading to diplomatic solutions. Oh my gosh, our evidence is so old. For testimony, their most recent evidence is from 320, and that is not even the best piece of evidence. The best piece of evidence is from 330, but we are controlling uniqueness. So Obama's strong position is leading the submission of Russia to diplomatic solutions, which he planned. The lapses their most recent evidence questions from a week and a half ago doesn't argue. Assume the recent phone call between Obama and Putin. The 1AC evidence is from the 1AR evidence is from the beginning of February. The Ukraine solution even started to happen. You've also conceded its reverse causal. If Obama fails on the deal now, it will escalate immediately. Go to the link debate. Asserting that the China link is not going to cut it. Presenting a unified front of Obama and Congress is key to deter Russia. They will follow the U.S. response to it, even if two conceded link arguments. First, the only argument the 1AR has consented is not going to fight the plan. But independent of fighting the plan, you can see the plan is controversial, causing a massive amount of fighting within Congress, and it also opens the floodgates for other forms of restrictions and debates and perhaps which unified they've not extended the total link to defense to the link claim, which means that we win the plan presumption of discord between the president and Obama is independently going to trigger. Russia will use the opportunity. Second is because the Gonzalez codifying status quo policy is more likely to cause pressure with resistance because Obama's afraid that, oh no, Congress is going broke, I don't even use this power to try to restrict me. What are they going to do? He will massively fight the claim. We're the only ones reading link evidence on this as contextual by contextual. Even he may not use the authority. Your evidence helps determine how you respond to a congressional authorization. The wins evidence by restrictions. I am pretty confident that the restrictions are not going to happen in the next few days. The Congress is already focused on Ukraine, which means we were the only ones who control the unique. The Ukraine resolve argument was what? Do you need anything else for that?
STS conflict.
Sure. Trump trying to see no impact defense, which is at least tiebreaker because we have two distinction areas versus an after public duty. Go to the court's counterclaim. Permutation doesn't have home should not be advocating cross-extent that we get the all of our data links based off of Congress, which means Ukraine is has still links. Or I would see that they get to extend the permutation of the after all of a sudden a court action. That means they link they do solve not only after, so I'm stating that there's no risk of the court solving the forms of not take out. We have deal failures happening now. Obama's already visiting Europe now, which means he has happened. Your evidence is nebulous about how there's going to be future elections in Ukraine. Does not raise the threshold about Russia, whatever this calculator reviews a former US, the US have goes to the CMR advantage. I think you can see there's almost no risk of it. There's no risk of try or die. If it's not even some attempt to try, that is sufficient. You can see the two that they're willing to escalate because they view it as an existential threat, which is not able to resolve it. You also can see that the other 1 AR concession is that the plan does not enough to sufficiently destroy the military, because obviously the military can both train for civilian exercises at home and also control our nuclear weapons and our Navy. There's no sense. These are both tactical 1 AR concessions, which means you should treat them as true. Go to the terrorism myth. The terrorism myth, there are a couple key variations. A subpoint is that even if they win 100% risk of the terrorism page, you can see that terrorism is unique, is inherently probabilistic. Yes, it may eventually happen, maybe inevitability of when does that attack occur? I'm very betting there's a decent chance it does not happen before Tuesday, which means the outweighing attack time frame. B subpoint, it does not turn the case. You have to win at the UA. That they have to be able to build a weapon between, they don't have access to a nuclear weapon today because they're definitely not sitting on one, just not launching it, or they're able to build one by Tuesday, which is very unlikely. Also, multiple alternative causality staff reading more all calls evidence of the 1 AR is not sufficient. Your evidence is talking about domestic drone problems in broader counterterrorism because we use of force outside of combat zones, i.e. the self-defense act, which the act is clearly not even solved. B subpoints and U.S. detention practices outside the U.S. because of our use of military commission is really pissing off because they view it as a human rights violation. The third piece of 2AC program is all indicates that not domestic drones, but foreign drones killing terrorists all happen. Look, they can. Also, the uniqueness argument also applies here because either A, it's been on the books for that many years, and the EU is still cooperating with us to some extent, which is at least sufficient to solve. Because if it's a linear impact, it's not like there's no cooperation now, which at least we can stave it off or have a decent chance to happen, versus the conceded internal link and time frame distinction between this ad and an asserted no link argument when we have read carded responses to why your assertion is wrong.
303. Radio.
Trade. All right.
I won that too.
Is anyone not ready? Yes, we good? Okay, cool. It's really hard for them to make the framing of this debate try or die when they have conceded multiple case impacts and all of them are inevitable in the status quo, and try or die on the AF Trump's not reading impact defense on the negative because it proves an inevitability claim that is structural, that extinction is coming in the status quo, and there is only a risk that the AF solves it, not a risk that the AF calls, and now they have dropped bioweapons. It is extinction. Now we didn't only go for a nuclear terrorism scenario. Mervold evidence indicates that it outweighs the dissent because intervening actors can always solve war scenarios even if there's a short time frame for them, but they cannot stop a bioweapon attack. The 2NR did not extend any of the 2 and C's burnout defense, even if that makes a lot of sense to you intuitively. Look, if you cannot point to an answer to this after the debate, then don't end my debate career on it. They also dropped the grid impact. I know that agriculture collapse as a terminal impact is not amazing, but it is also not answered. Food is a conflict driver for most countries because they want to secure resources. So Lugar evidence is on point on this and suggests that it is a conflict magnifier for all of their terminal impacts. They, again, extinction is structurally inevitable in the status quo. Now they say that terrorism is inherently probabilistic. This does not apply to all terrorism impacts. There evidence specifically about nuclear terrorism, and even if it is probabilistic, then we are on the right side of probability. Our abundant and Dworkin evidence indicates that a joint threat assessment consensus is all on the side of yes, nuclear terrorism, that information and technology spread make them developing a bomb inevitable, and they have the motive and the motive to do so in the status quo, even if they don't actually have the literal capacity. We do not need to win that they develop a nuclear weapon by Tuesday because time frame doesn't outweigh magnitude in this magnitude or probability in this particular instance because intervening actors solve their evidence in the long term. Even if the link is a short time frame, the terminal impact is not a short time frame. They don't have a reason why an escalation scenario would happen between the U.S. and quickly now between the U.S. and Russia quickly. It also turns the dissent. I'll get to that. The turns the dissent or Barrett evidence indicates that a terrorist attack would cause U.S.-Russian accidental miscount. This also is a second reason why they can't win, try or die, because if we solve their terminal impact, then they cannot win. That there are things that are structurally inevitable, and they're structurally inevitable in the world of the plan. Now they say that our evidence is about domestic drones. I'll answer all of the international all causes here. First is that they have dropped the local cooperation internal link that I prompted Tyler to extend at the bottom of the 1AR on this flow. Even if they win every single argument about why EU cooperation and allied cooperation is inevitable, there is a separate internal link that says that people within the United States need to cooperate with us against terrorism. And now I'll answer the international detention all causes don't take out allies versus the domestic detention is uniquely key. It signals a dramatic departure from rule of law because we are willing to detain our own citizens. It also undercuts our political cover abroad. We cannot say that detention is only okay abroad. And 3 is it creates allied fears that we will detain their citizens who are in the United States. That is Chesney. The uniqueness argument doesn't apply here. Saying that the AF impacts are empirically denied doesn't make any sense when we are making a structural inevitability claim that they will happen in the future, even if they haven't happened in the past. And it's a reason why we need to do the plan. The time frame distinction wasn't conceded. It was a link time frame thing, not an impact time frame thing. Now go to the PCA advantage. This is another reason why they can't win the dissent going for the status quo. They have conceded that we solve the terminal impact. Or Lutz and our Griffin evidence all indicate that the only way in which we can deter Russia is if we have military readiness training, etc., all of which is diverted. If the military starts training for civilian missions, and sad versus they say that it's uniqueness evidence and the issue that we've had this authority for over a decade, but I've already sort of answered this inevitability argument on the other page that it is structurally inevitable. In the status quo, they say prefer specific Ukraine evidence, but not necessarily their terminal impact to Ukraine. It's just that Russia gets involved. If we win, that we solve the terminal impact of that otherwise there are also tons of external impacts to readiness which were not very well answered, like hedge deters conflicts in China, which solves their South China Sea, and impact that it solves in Taiwan, India, Pakistan, etc. None of this is answered. They say military power doesn't solve because Russia is willing to escalate. Only our evidence speaks to deterrence in the context of Russia. The plan also doesn't. The status quo does destroy the military. They assert that we can train for civilian exercises at home, but they don't read a piece of evidence on this. And our Wolverton and our Cannister, our Cunningham and Wilner evidence all indicate that there is a trade-off between foreign and domestic missions. The status quo is totally unwinnable. I have no idea how they can win the dissent ways. Now go to the court's counterclaim. The only argument that I have to answer here is that saying that normal means that we could be the court means that we don't solve any of our AF. Definitely not the case. That's not how normal means competition works. Saying that we could be the court doesn't mean we would most likely be. We said that in 1AC cross-sex that we would most likely be statutory restrictions, but that we could permute subspecification and the subspecification counterclaims. They also didn't extend a reason for why this means we don't solve our AF. Defer to all of the explanation that I've already done on the other page. Ukraine.
Yeah, you want to know.
A couple of top-level arguments that just mean that this dissent is sort of silly. They do not have a piece of link evidence that says anything about detention or about domestic detention. If you can answer the question, why in the world would Putin care about whether we domestically detain in terms of our resolve on Ukraine at the end of this debate, then go ahead and vote on this dissent. But they don't have a piece of restriction evidence that is about anything that the AF does. The only other link arguments here are sort of jive. They say that he'll fight it's not that he'll fight the plan, but that the plan is controversial and causes infighting within Congress. They did not read a piece of evidence to substantiate infighting within within Congress, or we would have read a card and then card back at this. It is all spin, and they don't. And even if Congress fights it, and then fights it, the fact that Congress is fighting in the status quo should already tank the resolve impacts. Now they say that codifying status quo policy means that Obama will fight the plan, or Chesney evidence indicates that he definitely won't. He didn't fight the NDAA, which means that this is empirically proven. Now the only other arguments that I'm going for is that there's no chance of resolve. Now they've conceded all the indicts that Tyler made the 1A or their TMB is a should not argument. Yes, your author would like for the U.S. to look strong now, but they conclude that that is not a reality. Their big phone card says that the reason resolve is high in the ununderlined portion is because sanctions are high. That matters because it proves that pure military strength in the AF are not the only question. Sanctions will inevitably solve. Economic actions matter too. This not only takes out resolve answers, but also proves that there is zero link to the plan. This card alone is 100% affirmative. Takes out the link to the dis. Said no link means no try or die for them. At least we have some defense, even if their hypothetical impact is correct. Now Lafranchi definitely goes AF. We'll email it out. It says if Obama is going to get Europe further penalties against Russia, he is going to have to make a deep commitment to ramping up transatlantic diplomacy. Europe is frustrated and disappointed in Obama's record and suspicious of his foreign policy priorities. That takes out large swaths. Their internal link. They say that our most recent card is from 320. Even if that is true, I think we are smoking them on the question of whether the plan links, and their recent uniqueness evidence cites a bunch of other reasons for why resolve is high now, which means that if they are right, there is zero chance that the plan would be able to derail any of them.
Yeah, it's so good.
Can you both compile docs with just relevant things?
I'll do that. I'll also leave this thing if you want to put it in there.
Okay.
What'd you go for?
Oh, nice.
What? What game?
Scores.
I safely assume that everyone just wants a consolidated doc. Okay.
One AR is attached, and then the two AR cards in the text of the email.
Oh yeah.
I just said into Solvency, yeah.
Did you send this to me already? Oh yeah, I got it. So awkward.
Anything else from your cat?
MSU, you haven't sent your back out, right? In the system. Okay.
Sorry, there's just
No,
some
no
lost
problem. Just making sure I didn't miss that. Did you? And who's in? Like the last one, what? Spell name card down. Sure.
My guys.
Alright, now I'm sending you back out. Alright, I just sent this back to everyone. Go over to that.
Sorry, Carly, is the plan in here?
Oh, I forgot to include the plan. Okay, my bad. Can I just send out a separate email to everyone with the plan?
Yeah, just reply to that.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, I just sent all of you the plan.
I know, it's really creepy.
It is actually really creepy. Watson was like, good round, and also I can see you like this. And
Yeah.
it's like,
That's totally weird.
it's dawn.
check and it's easy. But that's what you should do.
Sorry.
I guess I can